Hello there, everyone. How are you today? My name is Brendan Thomas Marrett, and today we are starting a tripartite study on the crisis of the age. Sometimes it might feel like we all woke up in clown world, in bizarro world, where everything is nuts, everything is crazy, everything is insane, and the lunatics are running the asylum. It should feel that way because that is very accurate. However, what the powers that be are doing today, what the one world government, the one world order of this age is doing today, it's not by happenstance, not by chance. They didn't just wake up one day and decide to be evil and malevolent. It's actually a continuation of an assault against the human race and heaven that began thousands of years ago with the first emperor, Nimrod. Nimrod, historians tell us, was a mighty ruler over several cities and kingdoms, and he married his mother, Semiramis. Don't think about it too much, it gets pretty gross pretty quickly. And together, they had a son, or what for her could have been a grandson, called Tammuz. That's a little bit more complicated. Um, what probably actually happened was Nimrod was off on the battlefront, and Semiramis wanted to scratch the itch, so she committed adultery and got pregnant with Tammuz. But she told everyone it was Nimrod's son. Um, but yeah, we have at least one instance of just rape in this family. It's horrific. So Nimrod would do battles. He was the mighty hunter of the souls of men. He was a mighty warrior, a mighty killer. And one day, while he was off on the battlefront, he finally met his end. But like I said, his mother dearest, Semiramis, was playing the field. She was a bit of a whore. So she decided to commit adultery with someone else on her son. And she ended up getting pregnant. But then she told everyone that the sun itself had actually gotten her pregnant, that Nimrod had somehow magically, miraculously become the sun, and his rays had impregnated her. You could say she had an immaculate conception. And that child was Tammuz. So not only was Nimrod in a supernatural sense the sun, sun, but in a natural, miraculous sense, he was also the sun, son. Tammuz was Nimrod reincarnated. His spirit had somehow gotten into the sun, but his body had entered Semiramis, and he had effectively born himself. It sounds mad, it sounds crazy, but people, by and large, seem to accept that what they said was true, what Semiramis and her court said. What's very interesting about Nimrod is that this is the same Nimrod who created the Tower of Babel in the Bible. But this insane story that Semiramis proliferated about Nimrod on one hand being the father and the son, son and sun, it spread all around the world. I mean, the Tower of Babel was the first real instance you see in the Bible of paganism. But if you look at Egypt, you have Isis, the goddess, but then you've also got Horus and Osiris, where you have a father-son relationship where one is effectively replicated in the other. And Horus is the god of the sun, and Osiris is the god of the dead, who's in the underworld. with Baal and Ashtoreth. Baal is the Philistine god of abortion and child sacrifice. We look at him a lot in these studies. And Ashtoreth, also known as Ishtar, was a goddess of transgenderism. She was seen as one who could turn male to female and transform female to male. She was also infamous for stealing the iconography of other deities. She would even, in time, steal the rainbow of Yahweh. So, in a lot of the iconography for Ashtoreth, you see actually a rainbow, which we, of course, associate to the days of Noah, when the Lord put his own rainbow in the sky. Now, Baal and Ashtoreth were seen as consorts of each other. And Baal, there's a lot of names, a lot of appearances, a lot of reputations. He was seen as the god of storms as well, in addition to the god of child sacrifice, the god of death, the god of life, the god of resurrection, the All Father. He was basically set himself up to be a replacement for Jesus. But a lot of historians actually say that the Baal and Ashtoreth myths also began at the Tower of Babel with Nimrod and Semiramis. Historians tell us the same about Apollo. Apollo, you see even here an image from the French Olympic Games when they played the hymn to Apollo, got trapped in the underworld, and there he waits until he can get out. And in the Bible, we're told that Apollyon, Abaddon, the destroyer, is in Tartarus, waiting to get out. He was one of the demons who got women pregnant in the days of Noah. So an angel who looked down on a woman, thought, ooh la la, corporealized, had sex with her. He became a demon, because for a woman to do the do with an angel is the same as a human doing it with a dog. Two different kinds of creature. It should not happen. It is reprobate. And he got locked away in Tartarus, and there he awaits his day of reckoning, his day of revenge against the human race, which occurs during the Great Tribulation, during the end times, during the perilous times, during the apocalypse. But like our good friend Osiris is locked away in the underworld, so too is Apollo. So you can see a similarity there. And again, historians seem to agree on the whole that the Apollo myth began with the Tower of Babel. Then we have the Bacchus of Euripides, Dionysius. I remember when I started university, the very first play that we ever had to read was the Bacchus of Euripides, and I think page 1 features women running around moaning, and I thought, oh my goodness, what has happened to these poor women? Who is out to get them? Are they injured? Do they need help? And maybe after the second or third moaning reference, I realized, oh, this is absolute smut. This is disgusting. If any of you have seen the horror movie The Purge, not really too dissimilar from the Bacchus of Euripides. It's this idea that if you want to have an orderly, successful, efficient society, you need to carve out time where people can just blow off some steam in drunken revelry and let all the madness out of their system. They need that outlet. A time when evil is absolutely okay. So he's a god of drunkenness, a god of wine. He's also a demigod who's, well, one of his parents is a god, one of his parents is mortal. So again, you could say he is an antichrist, not that antichrist, an antichrist. He is a counterfeit Christ. And again, you saw him at the French Olympic Games opening ceremony. as well as transgender Jesus and the transgender Last Supper. Historians also conclude that his mythology began or was heavily inspired by the antics going on at the Tower of Babel and Nimrod's family. And another one is Pan. I've spoken quite a bit about Pan on this channel before. From his name, we get the word pandemic. So with Pan, in Jesus' day, in Matthew 16, you can read about it. They went to Caesarea Philippi, and his disciples were very, very uncomfortable. And they came to a massive, big wall, which had grooves in it for idols to the fawn, to the half man, half goat, the satyr. And Jesus said, "This is the gate of hell." That is what it was called. And the people who were there, who were worshiping there, believed that Pan was within a dimension inside the wall, but could be roused or aroused out of it. So they would take their goats and they would drown their goats. But if he did not rear his head, they would drown their babies. And if that did nothing, then they would offer him pandemonium, sex magic, and they would have a mass orgy with humans and with goats, and hope that that would cause the spirit of Pan to leave through the mountain. So Jesus takes his disciples there. He points at the gates of hell, as it was called, the gates of Hades, and he says, "No spirit in there is going to stop what I'm doing on the earth. What I'm building, the kingdom I'm building, will not be toppled by any profane, defiled demon." Again, historians by and large agree that the Pan mythology also originates with the Tower of Babel and its first family of Nimrod, Semiramis, and Tammuz. The Roman festival of Lupercalia was celebrated on the 15th of February. And the Luperci were young men between the ages of 20 and 40. And at the Lupercal altar, they offered a male goat and a dog as a sacrifice. And then their foreheads were anointed with the blood. They cut thongs or whips, known as februa, how we get the word February, from the animal skins. Then they ran around the old Palatine boundary naked, or half naked, whipping women as they went to purge and purify the community. And even with this Roman festival, and the reason I included this actually is when I first taught this lesson, it was Sunday the 15th of February. But Plutarch gives more information. Here's a quote from him. "Many of the noble youths and other magistrates run up and down through the city naked, for sport and laughter, striking those they meet with shaggy thongs. And many women of rank also purposefully get in their way. They actually put themselves in harm's way, in danger. And like children at school, present their hands to be struck, corporal punishment, believing that the pregnant will thus be helped in delivery, and the barren to pregnancy." And again, historians agree that this kind of cult also has its roots in the hedonistic wickedness exhibited at the Tower of Babel. And you see here how it is the elites who are doing this. It's the elites, the noblemen, the noblewomen, who are initiating this. who are the driving force, who are complicit, who are normalizing it. And look at the world that we're living in today. Think of BLM, the burning of America during the lockdown. How all those wicked, defiled celebrities who live in their mansions with their big gates and their private security encouraged the ravaging and the burning and the looting and the destroying of their own country. Not of their mansions, not of their homes, but, where the poor people lived, or those who are common people in their eyes, and how they funded terrorism against their own communities. Look at the political establishment in Ireland, in the UK, most European countries, many states in the US, Australia, and how the political class absolutely loathe and despise the middle class and the working class and do everything they can to make their lives difficult. None of this just happened by chance. They're all following blueprints established for them across the centuries. And you're going to see today how the Tower of Babel is what really set the wheels in motion. And why? It's because the Tower of Babel was Satan's attempt to bring in the apocalypse in about the 2000th year of history. A lot of people are talking about the apocalypse nowadays, the Great Tribulation, the perilous times. They're saying, oh, but there are wars, there are rumors of wars, there are natural disasters, this is happening, and this is happening, and the Euphrates River is drying up, and yada, yada, yada. Nimrod was the first individual who actually effectively created a one world government. He created this city and a kingdom, this city, this kingdom, this city, this kingdom. And he ruled over all of them with an iron fist. And the people were complicit with the delusion and the illusion and the witchcraft and the malice and the God hating. And he had such a powerful grip on the world that only one man and one woman, Abraham and Sarai, Abraham and Sarah, were actually saved. Yes, they'd probably worshipped demons as well, living in the land of Ur. But when the Lord called Abram and said, I want you to take a walk, Abram said, okay. Now, yes, he made a mistake. He was told, take your wife, just uncleave from everybody, and instead took his father and his nephew. He slowed himself down by several years. But he began to take that walk. He began to take that journey. He began to walk it out. And progressively, gradually, bit by bit, got to know more and more about the Lord, his heart, his will, the way he works. He's a miracle working God. He's a God who has the power of life and has power of resurrection as well. He's a God who created nature and biology, but is not confined to them. He's not limited by the rules he established. And I want you to take courage and heart from that, friends. If two imperfect people having faith could stop the apocalypse back then, could stop the one world government back then, the body of Christ today has absolutely no excuse whatsoever for evil to have the foothold and the stronghold that it does on this earth. And it can be beaten back. All right. Let's have a look at the words and see what God has to say about Nimrod. And then we will jump back into our exposition for today. In First Chronicles 1:10, we're told that Cush fathered Nimrod. Now, Nimrod's name means rebellion. He became a mighty one on the earth. A mighty one means a warrior tyrant, a giant, an empire builder, a Gibborim. And Gibborim is the word that I personally prefer to use for giants after the flood. I say Nephilim for the pre-flood giants. I say Gibborim for those from Nimrod's day onwards. Isn't this interesting? Cush, a man, fathered Nimrod, a man. He became a Gibborim. That means that in the days of Nimrod, they were experimenting with science and sorcery. And you know you're in a civilizational winter when science really takes on an occultic flair. And basically, they unlocked the key to making humans Nephilim. They would still have had the cultural memory of Nephilim having been on the earth, bringing about World War Zero and the Great Flood that washed them all away. So Nimrod wanted that to be reactivated in his time. Not through angels sleeping with women again. I think they'd the Nephilim creators had learned their lesson. They were locked away in prison, and a prison world called Tartarus, and the other angels in a fallen state were like, maybe not. But they still passed on demonic technology and tools and strategies to help him in his quest. Then we have Genesis 10:9-12. Nimrod was a mighty hunter before the Lord. That means he puts himself before the Lord. He saw himself as number one. It means he openly defied the Lord. It means he self-assertively came to conspicuous prominence under God's gaze, lifting himself up, elevating himself. That is why it said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. Now, no one says that today, but it was a common expression in Moses' day when he wrote this. The first centers of his kingdom were Babylon, Babel, Uruk. Other translations say Erech in the same place. Akkad, and Calneh in Shinar. From that land, he went to Assyria, which became a superpower later on, where he built the city of Nineveh, which is where Jonah was later sent to prophesy. Rehoboth, Calah, and Rezin, which is between Nineveh and Calah, which is the great city. So here we see he's a kingdom builder and an empire builder because he's the king over all of them. Then we get to Genesis 11:1-9, where we're going to hone in on one of those places in particular, Babylon. Now the whole world had one language and a common speech. As people moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar and settled there. They said to each other, "Come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly." They used brick instead of stone, and tar for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city, with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we'll be scattered over the face of the whole earth." So this was about becoming gods in their own eyes. And note that when the Lord made the man and the woman, Adam and Eve, they were told to multiply, to spread across the earth. They were never going to stay in the Garden of Eden forever. They were supposed to multiply and take dominion of the earth, bring the wild earth into accordance and alignment with the word of God. Go demon hunting because they could see all the demons around them, and to bring them into subjugation, to push back the darkness in the spirit realm that was overlapping with the physical realm. Humans were made for war. We were made to do battle. In the natural, your body is a fighting machine. You have karate, taekwondo, jujitsu, kung fu, mixed martial arts, boxing, kickboxing, wrestling. How much more so then in the spirit and the soul? But these guys do not want to spread all across the earth. They actually are doing this deliberately to defy the word and the will of God. Rather than spreading all across the earth, as he had said, they were happy to build an empire in their image. Again, they had a God mind, a God mentality, not capital G, lowercase g, where they were gods. Verse 5, but the Lord came down to see the city and the tower the people were building. The Lord said, if as one people speaking the same language, they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language, so they will not understand each other. Ooh, he's very cheeky, very mischievous. So the Lord scattered them from there over all the earth, and they stopped building the city. That is why it was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole world. From there, the Lord scattered them over the face of the whole earth. All right, Daniel 7, verses 2 to 4. Here, you're going to get a look at what the demonic king over Babel or Babylon looks like. Daniel declared, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea, and four great beasts came up out of the sea, different from one another. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. Then as I looked, its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and the mind of a man was given to it. Now you might be wondering, how did that demonic king get that position in the first place? Well, Deuteronomy 32, 7 to 9 tells us very clearly. Remember the days of old. Consider the generations long past. Ask your father, and he will tell you. Your elders, and they'll explain it to you. Now, days of old. So Moses is looking back retroactively to the book of Genesis. He's talking about the Tower of Babel. When the Most High, now the Most High is a name first used for the Lord when he talks to Abraham, and Abraham was called as a result of the Tower of Babel. So that's why he's using the same name here to help you with the time frame. When the Most High gave the nations their inheritance, when he divided all mankind, when he split them up, when he spread them apart, he set up boundaries for the peoples. He created nations, created countries, according to the number of the sons of God. That means angels, or in this case, dark angels, angels in rebellion. Because remember, in the days of Nimrod, in the days of that division, that's when he called Abram and Sarai. So there aren't, some people say, sons of God means humans. It can't, because there was only one human who was willing to do what he was told. And even he did it very imperfectly. For the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob his allotted inheritance. Jacob got renamed Israel. So this is God saying, this is when I began to make Israel a nation. When that happened? When he called Abram. He said, Abram, take a walk. Wherever you put your foot will become Israel, will become my chosen nation, a nation in which mighty rulers will come, a nation's going to bless the whole world. And if this nation gets cursed by others, they themselves will be cursed. So here he is talking about the Tower of Babel and choosing Abram or Israel as a solution to pushing back the one world order, to pushing back the Antichrist agenda in the earth. Which is why Antichrist type nations are so hell bent on destroying Israel and always have been. So when it says he set up boundaries of the peoples according to the number of sons of God, this is sons of God who did something they should not have done in the days of the Tower of Babel. And as we are going to see as we look later on, this is the third heavenly rebellion. You've got people in rebellion creating a one world order, a one world government. And similarly, you've got angels who are now rebelling as well. And in the mythology affiliated with Babylon, they would go up their temple towers and they said that angelic beings, spirits, would come and meet with them and they would worship them. They designed the towers because it's not just one. Okay, the Tower of Babel is most famous or infamous, but all across the cities that Nimrod occupied, you will find these towers. They're called ziggurats. So they would have gardens on top of them, like the Garden of Eden, a counterfeit Garden of Eden, and angels would come down, they would speak to them, they would worship them, they would praise them, and these angels received their praise. So you've got people in rebellion who see themselves as gods, and then you've got angels who see themselves as gods. They became demons. So when the Lord spread the people across the nations, he said, you know what? If you love these demons so much, go on, worship them. See if I care. These demons were supposed to be angels who monitored people and watched over them and guarded them and protected them. But instead, they grabbed them, they seized them, they took the opportunity to put chains on them. And these are now the powers, the principalities, the despots, the demonic kings and queens in the dark realm. And last but not least, for right now, Isaiah 14, 3 to 23. This is when the Lord prophesies the destruction of Nimrod. And you can look at it in multiple ways. You can look at it as he's condemning a spiritual enemy. You can say, you know, that there are different wicked kings he's prophesying against here, but Nimrod first and foremost. Then the Lord has given you rest from your pain and turmoil and the hard service with which you were made to serve. You will take up this taunt against the king of Babylon. How the oppressor has ceased, the insolent fury ceased. The Lord has broken the staff of the wicked, the scepter of the rulers, that struck the peoples in wrath with unceasing blows, that ruled the nation in anger with unrelenting persecution. The whole earth is at rest and quiet. They break forth into singing. The cypresses rejoice at you, the cedars of Lebanon, saying, since you were laid low, no woodcutter comes up against us. Sheol beneath is stirred up to meet you when you come. It rouses the shades to greet you, all who are the leaders of the earth. It raises from their thrones all who are kings of the nations. All of them will answer and say to you, you too have become as weak as we. You've become just like us. Your pomp is brought down to Sheol. The sound of your harps. Maggots are laid as a bed beneath you, and worms are your covers. How you are fallen from heaven, O day star, son of the dawn. How you are cut down to the ground, you who laid the nations low. You said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven, above the stars of God. I will set my throne on high. I will sit in the mount of assembly in the far reaches of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. But you are brought down to Sheol, the realm of the dead, the grave, to the far reaches of the pit. Those who see you will stare at you and ponder over you. Is this the man who made the earth tremble? Who shook kingdoms? Who made the world like a desert and overthrew its cities? Who did not let his prisoners go home? All the kings of the nations lie in glory, each in his own tomb. But you are cast out, away from your grave, like a loathed branch, clothed with the slain, those pierced by the sword, who go down to the stones of the pit, like a dead body trampled underfoot. You will not be joined with them in burial, because you have destroyed your land, you have slain your people. May the offspring of evildoers never more be named. Prepare slaughter for his sons, because of the guilt of their fathers, lest they rise and possess the earth, and fill the face of the world with cities. I will rise up against them, declares the Lord of hosts, and will cut off from Babylon name and remnant, descendants and posterity, declares the Lord. And I will make it a possession of the hedgehog and pools of water, and I will sweep it with a broom of destruction, declares the Lord of hosts. Flavius Josephus, possibly the most famous ancient Roman historian, also describes the life and times of Nimrod in Antiquities of the Jews, chapter 4. And I have to say, so much what he says corroborates what the Word of God says, and he gives some extra interesting details too. I'm not saying that we regard this on the same level as Scripture. This is not biblical, it is extra biblical. But if it doesn't contradict the Bible, it is worth looking into and seeing if there's something to glean. This is what he writes. God also commanded them to send colonies abroad for the through peopling of the earth, that they might not raise seditions among themselves, but might cultivate a great part of the earth and enjoy its fruits after a plentiful manner. Basically, people were supposed to spread out so they would not be competing for resources. There was enough to go around. But they were so ill instructed that they did not obey God. The authorities, the elite, told them differently. For which reason they fell into calamities and were made sensible by experience of what sin had been guilty of. For when they flourished with a numerous youth, God admonished them again to send out colonies. They had more and more kids, and God said, please go, spread your wings and fly away. But they, imagining the prosperity they enjoyed, was not derived the favor of God, but supposing that their own power was the proper cause of the plentiful condition they were in, did not obey him. They did not say, Oh my goodness, we're so blessed. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, God Most High. No, they said, well, of course, I'm living in good times. Look how amazing I am. Of course, I've got money. Aren't I fabulous? They gave him no praise, no worship, no acknowledgement. Nay, they added to this their disobedience to the divine will, the suspicion that they were therefore ordered to send out separate colonies, that, being divided asunder, they might the more easily be oppressed. So instead of saying, let's spread out so we have enough resources for ourselves, they said, let's dig in our heels. Let's put down our roots here in cities. This way we will be overtaken less easily. And who was this person who put it all in their heads? Now it was Nimrod who excited them to such an affront and contempt of God. He despised the Lord. He was the grandson of Ham, the son of Noah, a bold man and of great strength of hand. He was strong. He persuaded them not to ascribe it to God, as if it was through his means that they were happy, but to believe that it was their own courage which procured that happiness. So basically, trust the government and you will be fine. He also gradually changed the government into tyranny. Don't we see that today? Look at all the attempts to come against free speech. Here in Ireland, you see attempts in the United States. England is so far down the Swanee, you can't even see their feet anymore. Germany has hate speech laws, especially regarding the Holocaust, which I entirely disagree with. In Germany, it is illegal and punishable to say the Holocaust did not happen. Do I think saying that it's brain dead stupidity? Yes. Do I think people should be allowed to make that mistake? Yes. I do not know where I left off. I'm going to start that sentence again. He also gradually changed the government into tyranny, seeing no other way of turning men from the fear of God, but to bring them into a constant dependence on his own power. Isn't that the truth? He also said he would be revenged on God if he should have a mind to drown the world again. For that, he would build a tower too high for the waters to be able to reach, and that he would avenge himself on God for destroying their forefathers. Now, as I've covered in this channel so many times before, Noah and his sons and his wife were blameless in the Lord's sight. Blameless means that they were righteous by faith, but also it means biologically pure, biologically unblemished. And that means everyone else on the earth either had latent Nephilim DNA or was an Nephilim. Um, so what Nimrod is doing here is he's actually showing support for the Nephilim. He's offended on the Nephilim's behalf, which is insane. And again, the Nephilim were giants. They were crossbreed hybrids, the result of human women sleeping with demons. They were incredibly tall, incredibly powerful, incredibly violent, and every thought and intention that they had was wicked. And now Nimrod has become a Gibborim. He's turned himself into a giant. Presumably, many people in his kingdom underwent similar, I don't know if surgery is the right word, I'll say treatment, supernatural, magical, scientific treatment. And he's offended on behalf of the Nephilim, and he wants his new race of Gibborim to avenge them. So if the Lord should go against his earlier decree, I will never flood the world again, and should decide to flood the world again, this time they will not be washed away. They will not be swept away. And that's why they made the tower out of burnt brick and mortar, because these materials do not easily allow water in. Now, the multitude were very ready to follow the determination of Nimrod and to esteem it a piece of cowardice to submit to God. That means if you're a believer, think of these people say, "Oh, you're a Christian? Oh my goodness, you're so stupid. You need to get a life. You need to read a science book. You're an idiot. You're a clown. That makes no sense." And those very same people lie prostrate to the feet of politicians, of celebrities, of pedophiles, of news anchors, of dimwits. And they built a tower, neither sparing any pains, nor being in any degree negligent about the work. And by reason of the multitude of hands employed in it, it grew very high, sooner than anyone could expect. Like I said, there was not just one tower. They're all over Nimrod's empire. But this one in particular is the most famous or infamous, famous for wrong reasons, because they just threw themselves in. They said, okay, if the government says it, we have to do it. We will abide. We will obey. We will co-labor with the very forces that are trying to destroy us. But the thickness of it was so great, and it was so strongly built, that thereby its great height seemed, upon the view, to be less than it really was. It was built of burnt brick, cemented together with mortar, made of bitumen, that it might not be liable to admit water. So it didn't look to be as big. It actually was massive, but that's because it was so thick and so sturdy. But again, they specifically made it from materials that, in their estimation, would keep water out should God have a mind to send a second great flood, which, for all of you climate change enthusiasts, he will not. Now, these towers were stepping stone pyramid shaped. They're called ziggurats. You can actually see one still in Uruk. Again, some places call it Erech. It's the same thing, it's the same place. Now, the Garden of Eden, we're told in Ezekiel 28, was planted supernaturally quickly by God on a mountain, on God's holy mountain. So therefore, Nimrod built his towers on a mountain. The man and the woman, Adam and Eve, were effectively kings and priests of the earth. And Nimrod was a king, and he had a priest class. These towers were temple towers. The Garden of Eden had a river, the River Eden, that broke into 4 streams. And each ziggurat would have 4 sides to represent 4 mystical rivers. The Garden of Eden had a garden. It had all kinds of trees. And these ziggurats would have forests and gardens atop of them. And that was where the people would go to worship these demigods, these supernatural beings. And as we see in Genesis, we see the Lord coming, walking in the breeze and the cool of the day. The breeze, the cool of the day, in Hebrew means in the ruach, in the spirit. It means he would come in power. He would come in creative energy and gusto. He would come in prophetic utterances. That's what the ruach is. That's what the spirit of, or the gentle breeze actually means. That's what the cool of the day means. You're not going to get that experience with a demon, but they would replicate it or put a twist on it in Nimrod's towers. And these angels who are now in rebellion would come down and they would give instructions to the people and they would receive the worship of the people. And again, they then became demons, and because they were being worshipped, they became the powers, the authorities, the demonic kings and queens. That's how in the Book of Daniel you have the Prince of Persia spirit. You can also see a ziggurat in the land of Ur, which is actually where Abram was living. He probably worshipped at a ziggurat, as did his half sister, who was also his wife, Sarai. She was probably worshipping alongside him. And then the Lord called him and said, "Go for a walk. I'm taking you out of here." And in fact, some Jewish writers actually believe that Abram knew Nimrod and that they'd had different confrontations and quite an adversarial relationship. I don't know if that's true, but again, if it doesn't contradict the Bible, there's no harm looking into it. In Iran today, you can see the ziggurat of Choga Danbil. It gives you an idea of the stepping stone kind of structure of it. And here is an image generated of the great ziggurat of Ur, where you can see that the front door was like a portal, and you had to go up a great staircase to get there. Where the operations of heaven differ from the operations of man. Man always feels he has to go up a staircase himself to encounter the divine. But as we see in Genesis, when Jacob falls asleep with his head on the pillow made of stone, he actually sees a staircase coming down. Jesus on the top of it, and angels going up and down. And Jesus is the door. Jesus the access, the Father, and he came down to take us up. So we have a personal, relational God who comes down to us to take us into the spiritual heights. Whereas for Babylon, it was all about human effort. Now, Nimrod, in cultural memory and in mythology and in literature, lives on, but he goes through different names. The most famous of all of them is Gilgamesh. There are people who would tell you the Bible is a book of fairy tales and you have to trust it and to avoid it like the plague, and even they believe Gilgamesh, the man, existed. He was the first hero of an epic tale, where effectively the story of the Great Flood was rewritten. And not only was Nimrod there, he was also the hero. He was Gilgamesh. And this brings us to the year 2003 in the land of Mesopotamia, so Iraq, Iran. And if you look closely, you'll actually see some places which I've already mentioned today, like just there at the bottom. And Iraq and Iran are effectively countries now which Nimrod had established and built his cities and his empire in. I'm just going to throw this out there. When the United States invaded Iraq, I do not just believe that it was militaristic in its conception. I do not believe the intentions behind it were oil based. Some people say it was all about oil, maybe to an extent. But actually, I believe there was supernatural and biblical intentions behind it. So the United States, leading a coalition of forces, launched the invasion of Iraq on the 20th of March 2003. It was early morning in Iraq, which is the evening of the 19th of March in the US, known as Operation Iraqi Freedom. This initial invasion phase initiated the Iraq War, allegedly aimed at removing Saddam Hussein's regime. Again, that's another reason that's been thrown out there, and it's probably the one that they led with in the media at the time. But actually, about that time, the BBC had an article, Gilgamesh Tomb Believed to be Found. Archaeologists in Iraq believe they may have found the lost tomb of King Gilgamesh, Nimrod, the subject of the oldest book in history. And now it says book in quotation marks, so it is written on stone tablets. This article came out the 29th of April, 2003. But of course, if archaeologists were already looking into it, it is very possible that the United States government had heard about it, because as you can see, there's just 1 month between these. Now, some people have tried to find more information on this and have come up very, very short. Here's a photograph that I came across online of someone requesting documents pertaining to the resurrection chamber of Gilgamesh, the location of his body, and the location of the buried Nephilim, but the case status reads as closed. All right, this is from the United Nations website. Babylon was the capital city for 2 famous kings of antiquity. More than 2, to be honest. Hammurabi, who introduced one of the world's first law codes, and Nebuchadnezzar, a very famous one in the Old Testament. Partially excavated over the last century, much of ancient Babylon, which lies 90 kilometers south of Baghdad, remains undiscovered. According to a 2005 British Museum report, the use of Babylon as a camp by the multinational force between April 2003 and December 2004 by coalition forces is tantamount to establishing a military camp around the Great Pyramid in Egypt or around Stonehenge in Britain. Basically, you wouldn't get away with it anywhere else. The final report noted that the Iraqi government's 1978 to 1987 restoration project rebuilt several buildings, erected modern facilities, and undertook new landscaping, in part to create a new palace for Saddam Hussein, to the great detriment of the site. So let's blame the dead guy. Babylon was plundered during the 2003 war, when contents from the Hammurabi and Nebuchadnezzar museums and from the Babylon Library and Archive were stolen and destroyed. Now they set up their camp, they set up their base over Gilgamesh's tomb. And now it's been destroyed, it's been obliterated. Things have been pinched from it. And they're stealing all these other artifacts as well. The new study noted that no new malicious or accidental damage has been reported since December 2004. Not to say it hasn't happened. And currently, problems are due to neglect and maintenance, and buildings previously restored are in poor condition. Blame the Eastern folk. Experts behind the final report called for a conservation plan to be implemented with the ultimate goal of nominating Babylon to join nearly 900 other sites on the UNESCO World Heritage List. Yes, let's conserve everything that's there after we have taken everything that we wanted. A senior US military officer has said he's willing to apologize for damage his troops caused one of Iraq's most famous ancient sites. A little late, some might say. Too little, too late. The British Broadcasting Corporation reported Friday that after the 2003 invasion of Iraq, US Marines had built a helicopter pad on the ruins of Babylon and filled their sandbags with archaeological fragments from the ancient city. Aha. I don't know about you, but I'm smelling bullcrap right now. It said vibrations from US helicopters caused the roof of one building to collapse. We're going to come back to that because that struck me as very strange. Colonel John Coleman, former chief of staff for the 1st Marine Expeditionary Force in Iraq, told the BBC that if the head of the Iraqi Antiquities Board wanted an apology, and if it makes him feel good, we can certainly give him one. So I'll say sorry if you really want it, and if I really want it. But he also asked, if it wasn't for our presence, what would the state of those archaeological ruins be? Okay. There are a lot of things there that I don't like, but this one just struck me as very, very peculiar. It said vibrations from US helicopters caused the roof of one building to collapse. I do not know much about helicopters, friends. I really truly don't. I've got a Kia Picanto. I know how to make it move. I know how to make it stop. I know what I need to know about vehicles, which is not a lot. I'm open to people having different opinions on this. I'm open to correction, but I thought that was weird. So I turned to ChatGPT. I'm not saying it's always helpful, but I was curious. So I asked, is this actually likely? Could the vibration of the helicopters destroy this building? And this is what it told me. Modern US military helicopters, such as the UH-60 Black Hawk or CH-487 Chinook, produce strong low-frequency sound waves, air pressure pulses, rotor wash, ground vibrations, but these are generally small unless extremely close. Even at very close range, hovering directly overhead at low altitude, the ground vibration amplitude is typically measured in fractions of a millimeter, usually less than vibration levels produced by heavy trucks passing nearby, construction equipment, small controlled demolition blasts. In structural engineering terms, helicopter vibrations are orders of magnitude weaker than what is normally required to cause structural collapse. How are Babylonian roofs built? Ancient Babylonian buildings were typically constructed with mud brick walls, wooden beams spanning across walls, reed mats, packed earth or mud roofing layers. Important characteristics. Roofs were heavy. Structural strength depended heavily on beam condition, wall integrity, moisture exposure, age-related decay. Common failure modes: rotting beams, water damage weakening support, wall erosion causing loss of load-bearing capacity. They were not tuned structures like bridges that are sensitive to resonance from specific vibration frequencies. What level of vibration would be required for the US helicopters to destroy this building? To collapse a roof purely from vibration, the vibration would need to exceed the structure's damping capacity. It would likely require sustained resonance matching the natural frequency of the roof system. The acceleration would need to approach what we see in moderate earthquakes, controlled demolitions, severe structural shaking. Helicopter-induced vibrations typically produce ground accelerations far below seismic levels, air pressure fluctuations insufficient to structurally damage heavy earthen roofs. To realistically collapse such a roof, via vibration alone, you'd need something closer to a nearby explosion, a significant earthquake, direct mechanical impact, not normal helicopter overflight. And then what about the rotor wash? What about air pressure? Rotor wash can blow loose debris, dislodge already unstable materials, cause local surface erosion. But for collapse, the roof would need to already be severely degraded. Beams would need to be near failure, and structural supports would have to be critically compromised. In that case, helicopter downdraft might act as a trigger, but not the primary cause of the collapse. So, the real life likelihood about the integrity or deception coming out of these people's mouths. Under realistic conditions, it's very unlikely that vibrations alone would collapse a Babylonian roof. It's extremely unlikely if if the structure had already been intact and was reasonably preserved. It's possible, but rare. Only if the structure is already on the verge of failure, severe decay is present, and the helicopter is hovering extremely low for an extended time, none of which they said. Even then, collapse would most likely be due to pre-existing structural failure, not helicopter vibration. So the bottom line, for helicopter vibrations to collapse an ancient Babylonian roof, they would need to reach near seismic intensity levels, which I do not see happening. And that is far beyond what standard US helicopters generate in real-world operations. So in practical terms, for all you laymen out there, helicopters are not strong enough to collapse intact ancient mud brick roofs through vibration alone. So this would suggest that they destroyed the tomb of Gilgamesh on purpose. To what end? Well, the enemy is always trying to bring in the apocalypse. You see it in Abram's day with Nimrod and the Tower of Babel. You see it in Daniel's day with Nebuchadnezzar and still the Empire of Babylon. You could say you see it in Absalom's day when he stole the throne from his father David and tried to eradicate his father and the redemptive seed of life that was in the earth. You could look at every empire that's ever lived, that ever existed. Look at all the dictatorships on the earth today who do everything they can to try to wipe out the body of Christ. Look at the European Union, the United Nations, the World Economic Forum, all the big groups on earth today who are intrinsically anti-Jesus, anti-Christian, and anti-Israel. You know, the big three. So I would say that they did it on purpose, that they knew what they were looking for. They found what they were looking for, and they took what they were looking for. And that is probably Gibborim DNA. Nephilim DNA from the days of Nimrod, the Gibborim, the new giants. Why would they want that? Well, I will leave that to your imagination and to your prayer life. There's a lot in this one, guys. So I hope that you enjoyed this study of ancient history and not really all that ancient history. Want to go back 23 years? This was part one in this mini series on the crisis of the age of looking at the first empire, and the one world government today are getting all their inspiration for the days of Nimrod. They just are. It's a fact. We are going to, in the next episode, look at the implications of that in our time. I'm going to show you how the political class, the entertainment class, the religious class, people you have voted for, people who are in charge of your politicians that you have not voted for, dictate. And I really emphasize dictate as in dictatorship. Dictate the reality we live in. The matrix, the panopticon, the prison of observation that we're trapped in. And I show you how some of the biggest names on earth are Baal worshippers, are devil worshippers, and they don't even try to hide it. And in the third part of this mini-series, I'm going to read some extracts from a novel that I published a few years ago called Reckoning, The Ghost of the Unsaid Reckoning. And even before I knew all of this to this extent, God was already prodding at me that reality is not what it's supposed to be. We're living in a simulation. We're living in a panopticon. We're living in a matrix. We're living in a movie being scripted by evil people who seek to rewrite reality, to change the definitions of things, to determine outcomes, and ultimately to steal, kill, and destroy. And what I read will be fictitious. It's true to the world of the story that I wrote. But if there are things there that you can apply to the world today, well, that is to the better, I suppose. I'm not going to tell you what is and is not fantastical and fictitious and what's realistic, but you bring that before the Lord, and he will not be long in telling you. Okay, so this is part 1 of 3. Have a super special, awesome, amazing rest of your day. I'll catch you in part 2. Cheerio, friends.